My name is Maya Lynn, and until recently, I was the lead AI architect at a company you've probably heard of, Titan Tech. I was the mind, the heart, the countless sleepless nights poured into the very soul of Sentinel Shield, a cybersecurity system so advanced, so paradigm-shifting, it was poised to redefine digital defense for the entire planet. They, the architects of my near demise, thought I was just another brilliant but pliable cog in their relentless machine, easily programmed with praise, easily replaced when my primary function was complete. They genuinely believed I'd gratefully accept the crumbs they'd deign to sweep from their overflowing table and simply say, "Thank you, sir. May I have another?" They had absolutely no idea I wasn't just a ghost in their machine. I was its conscience, the silent, omnipresent witness to their escalating ambition, and most crucially, the meticulous architect of my own deeply embedded safeguards. If you've ever poured your heart, your soul, your very essence into something magnificent, only to watch in horror as someone else swaggered up to snatch the credit at the triumphant finish line, or if you've ever felt systematically, almost invisibly undervalued, your most significant contributions minimized, while others soared to glory on half the effort and twice the audacity, then please comment and subscribe. You are absolutely going to want to hear every last detail of this. Trust me, if you've ever felt like the perpetually unsung hero in the grand opera of your own life, whether that stage was a high-stakes boardroom or the deceptively quiet arena of your own family dynamics, this story will irrevocably change how you perceive your worth, how you fight for what's undeniably yours, and ultimately, how you value the intricate tapestry of relationships, especially those you thought were meant to last forever. To truly comprehend why the meticulously orchestrated betrayal at Titan Tech nearly shattered me into a million irreparable pieces, and then paradoxically became the crucible that forged me into someone unbreakable, you need to journey back with me, back to the source code of my own programming. I grew up in a house that could have graced the cover of Suburbia Illustrated, a meticulously kept two-story colonial with a sprawling, unnaturally green lawn, the kind that looked achingly perfect on glossy Christmas cards. Inside, however, behind the polished veneer things were considerably more complicated, layered with unspoken rules and subtle hierarchies. My parents, David and Susan Lynn, were quintessential products of their own traditional post-war upbringings. My father, David, a stoic, emotionally reserved accountant, a man who worshipped at the altar of stability and quantifiable, spreadsheetable success above all else. His highest praise was a curt nod and, "Numbers look good." My mother, Susan, was a dedicated homemaker who fervently believed in the sanctity of maintaining appearances, the imperative of a spotless house, and the unwavering duty of supporting her husband's carefully constructed vision of a perfect, frictionless family unit. And then there was my older brother, Alex. Golden boy Alex. Alex was, and undoubtedly still is, effortlessly, infuriatingly charming. He was the kind of kid who could charm the squirrels out of your prize-winning rose bushes, fail a crucial history test, and somehow, through a dazzling combination of puppy dog eyes and convoluted excuses, convince our parents it was unequivocally the teacher's antiquated methods or personal bias that was to blame. He was all blinding sunshine, easy, infectious smiles, and a casual, unearned confidence that seemed to part crowds. I, on the other hand, was the quiet, introspective one, the shadow child often lost for hours in dusty library books about the vastness of astronomy, and later the nascent, thrilling world of computer programming that hummed beneath the surface of everyday life. My earliest, most vivid memories are steeped in the persistent, dull ache of feeling like a muted, sepia-toned photograph in a vibrant, technicolor family portrait utterly dominated by Alex's bright, inescapable hues. I vividly recall my fourth-grade science fair. It feels like yesterday. I'd poured weeks, entire sun-drenched afternoons and lamp-lit evenings into building an astonishingly detailed miniature working model of the solar system. The planets crafted from painted styrofoam balls actually rotated on tiny, intricate gears I'd painstakingly scavenged from old clocks and assembled with tweezers and glue. I even wrote a rudimentary program on our ancient wheezing home computer, a hulking beige box that took 5 minutes to boot, to calculate their approximate orbital periods, displaying them in glowing green text on the monochrome screen. Alex then, in 6th grade and far too cool for such nerdy endeavors, threw together a baking soda and vinegar volcano, the literal night before the fair, using a plastic soda bottle and some hastily applied papier-mâché. His volcano erupted with a dramatic, messy flourish, spewing red-dyed vinegar and frothy bubbles all over the gymnasium floor, making everyone shriek and then laugh hysterically. He was awarded a bright, ostentatious blue ribbon for Most Exciting Project. My meticulously crafted, silently whirring solar system, which quietly and accurately demonstrated complex celestial mechanics, received a polite, almost dismissive nod from the judges and a generic participation certificate. My father clapped Alex enthusiastically on the back, his face beaming with unadulterated pride. "That's my boy. Always knows how to make a real splash, a natural showman." My mother, meanwhile, fussed over cleaning the vinegar stains from Alex's favorite t-shirt, smiling indulgently at his charmingly sheepish grin. When I tried hesitantly to explain the complex gear ratios and the coding behind my project's quiet accuracy, my father patted my head absently, his gaze already drifting back to Alex's chaotic masterpiece. "Yes, dear, that's very clever, very technical. But look at Alex's volcano. What a showman. That's the kind of thing people remember." The message, though unspoken, thudded into my young heart with the force of a slammed door. Quiet, meticulous brilliance was demonstrably less valuable, less seen than loud attention, grabbing even if superficial mediocrity. This pattern, this subtle but consistent invalidation, repeated itself endlessly, becoming the background hum of my childhood. Academically, I was a star, a quiet supernova. I devoured mathematics and science textbooks. Like novels, taught myself BASIC, and then Pascal from library books before coding was even remotely cool, and consistently brought home report cards shimmering with A's and glowing teacher comments. These achievements were usually met with a mild, almost perfunctory, "That's nice, Maya. Very good. Keep up the good work." It was the kind of praise you give for remembering to take out the trash. Meanwhile, Alex's consistent C's and occasional D's were met with waves of parental concern, expensive private tutors, hushed, worried conferences with teachers, and then, if he managed to scrape a B- through sheer luck or last-minute cramming, immense relief and boisterous celebration. "He's really trying so incredibly hard, bless his heart," my mother would say, her voice laced with a fierce, protective pride. "It just doesn't come as easily to him as it does to you, Maya, you know. He has to work for it." The unspoken yet deafeningly clear implication was that my achievements, because they appeared effortless though they were anything but, were somehow less worthy of acknowledgement, less of an effort. When it came time for the daunting ritual of college applications, I was awarded a full academic scholarship to one of the country's most prestigious engineering programs, a place renowned for its cutting-edge AI research. My parents expressed primarily relief. "Well, that's good, Maya," my father said, adjusting his glasses. "That certainly saves us a considerable amount of money. Good planning." Their significant emotional and financial energy, however, was laser-focused on the Herculean task of getting Alex accepted into the local state university's decidedly less-than-stellar business program, despite his decidedly average grades and a SAT score that generously could be called unremarkable. My father called in favors with old college buddies, meticulously helped him craft and largely rewrite his application essay, and when Alex was somewhat miraculously accepted, a fact I later learned was significantly aided by a hefty, strategically timed alumni donation from a business associate of my father's, they threw a lavish celebratory barbecue. "Our son, Alex Lynn, the future businessman," Dad announced, raising a triumphant toast with his beer. To a bright future, my full ride to a top-tier institution was mentioned as a brief, almost apologetic footnote. and Maya's going off to study her computers, too. Very sensible. It wasn't that they were overtly cruel or intentionally malicious. There were no harsh words, no outright put-downs. It was a far subtler, more insidious form of dismissal, a consistent, pervasive undervaluing of my innate passions, my burgeoning talents, the very things that made my mind sing. My early fascination with the intricate logic of computers was a nice little hobby for Maya. My burning desire to understand and deconstruct complex systems from the cosmos to code was simply Maya being off in her own little world again as usual. When I'd excitedly try to explain my early coding projects, a simple text adventure game, a program that generated fractal patterns, their eyes would glaze over within seconds. "That's interesting, dear," my mother would murmur, her attention already drifting. "Can it make toast?" Alex would quip with his trademark smirk, and my father would chuckle. My mother would offer a polite, strained smile, and that would effectively, crushingly end any further discussion of my world. I learned slowly and painfully to keep my passions locked away, to work silently, diligently, in the sanctuary of my small bedroom. The steady, comforting glow of the CRT monitor, my only true confidant and cheerleader. That room smelling faintly of dusty books, old electronics, and the ozone tang of a hardworking computer became my haven, filled with posters of the Hubble Space Telescope and diagrams of early microprocessors, a stark contrast to the meticulously impersonal perfection of the rest of the house. Even our disparate experiences with summer jobs became another glaring point of contrast. I diligently sought out internships at small, often struggling tech startups, frequently unpaid, driven purely by the hunger for experience and knowledge. I learned to solder circuit boards, debug arcane code, and fetch coffee for stressed-out engineers. Alex, through another of my father's connections, landed a cushy, remarkably well-paying summer job at a large insurance firm owned by a golf buddy. His duties mostly consisted of making coffee-running photocopies and occasionally delivering interoffice mail. Yet he'd come home regaling our parents with exaggerated stories of important client meetings he'd sat in on and strategic brainstorming sessions he'd contributed to. My parents would listen completely enraptured. "He's got such a good natural head for business, that boy," Dad would declare, shaking his head in admiration. "A real people person. That's what gets you ahead in this world." My complex unpaid work designing a database for a local nonprofit was, "Oh, that's nice you're keeping busy, dear." My maternal grandparents were salt-of-the-earth farming folk who believed in hard physical labor and common sense. They found my father's accounting profession respectably steady, but were utterly bewildered by my interest in those complicated thinking machines. My paternal grandfather, a dapper man with a taste for speculative ventures, had lost a considerable sum in a bad stock market crash in the 70s, an event that had deeply scarred my father and cemented his lifelong obsession with safe, stable, predictable paths. My mother, raised by a mother who believed a woman's highest calling was a well-run home, and successful children defined by traditional metrics, simply didn't have the framework to understand a daughter who preferred algorithms to A-line skirts. Alex, with his easy charm and predictable aspirations, fit neatly into their predefined boxes of success. I was the outlier, the square peg they kept trying to hammer into a round hole. The deep, aching, almost physical desire for their genuine recognition, for them to truly see me, to understand and value what I valued, became a quiet, persistent hum beneath the surface of my entire existence. It wasn't about wanting more praise than Alex, or even equal praise in terms of volume. It was about wanting equal consideration, a fundamental acknowledgement that my path, though different, more complex, less immediately understandable to them, was just as valid, just as challenging, and just as worthy of their interest and pride. This perpetually unfulfilled need, this deep-seated corrosive feeling of being perpetually underestimated and fundamentally misunderstood, became the fertile, if painful, emotional soil in which my later professional ambitions and indeed my defense mechanisms took root. I didn't realize it with any clarity then, of course, but my family life was inadvertently, painstakingly training me for the Brandon Holts of the world. It was an advanced immersive masterclass in having your most significant contributions minimized, your authentic voice systematically muted, and your intrinsic worth constantly, implicitly questioned. And it was unbeknownst to me slowly building a vast reservoir of steely resolve I hadn't yet learned how to tap, let alone weaponize. The insidious pattern of being overlooked of my achievements being subtly downplayed so deeply ingrained in the fabric of my childhood didn't magically evaporate when I packed my bags and drove away to university. Oh no, it followed me, a persistent, unwelcome shadow clinging to my heels through the hallowed halls of academia and into the brightly lit, often bewildering corridors of my early career. Each hard-won milestone, each significant achievement that should have felt like a clear, ringing bell of success, instead felt like it was being viewed through a distorting lens, one that consistently, frustratingly diminished its true significance, especially when juxtaposed with Alex's more relatable, or more accurately, more loudly and enthusiastically celebrated mundane successes. I graduated summa cum laude in computer engineering with a thesis on neural network optimization that my supervising professor called genuinely groundbreaking for an undergraduate. At my graduation ceremony, a sweltering May afternoon, my parents were there, of course. They smiled, they dutifully took the requisite photographs, my mother dabbing her eyes with a lace-trimmed handkerchief. But the celebratory dinner afterwards at a noisy Italian restaurant Alex picked was almost entirely dominated by his recent decidedly minor promotion at the local branch of a regional bank where he worked as a teller. He was now officially Assistant Branch Manager Trainee, a title that seemed to involve mostly the same duties but with a slightly larger name badge. He's really moving up in the world, that one. My father declared, his chest visibly puffed with pride as he addressed the table. Banking now, that's a solid, respectable career. Tangible. People understand banking. Stability. My degree, the culmination of 4 relentless years of intense study, countless all-nighters fueled by lukewarm coffee and genuinely groundbreaking research in the burgeoning field of artificial intelligence, was acknowledged with, "Very impressive, Maya, truly. But what exactly will you do with all that complicated computer stuff? Is there a clear career path there?" It was the same old weary song, just a slightly different, more sophisticated verse. The dismissal now came with a veneer of pragmatic concern. My first real job was at a mid-sized software company, Innovate Solutions, a name that promised more than it delivered. I was part of a team tasked with developing a new, more robust encryption algorithm for their flagship financial software. About 3 months in, during a late-night code review, I identified a critical, subtle flaw in our core architectural approach, a vulnerability that could potentially compromise user data under specific, albeit rare conditions. More importantly, I proposed a novel, elegant solution that not only fixed the gaping issue, but also significantly enhanced the algorithm's processing efficiency by nearly 20%. It was a genuine breakthrough, the kind that makes your stomach flip with excitement. When the project was successfully launched on time and under budget, my direct manager, a perpetually harried man named Mark Jenkins, presented it to the company executives in the main boardroom. He briefly vaguely mentioned the team's hard work and dedication, but then proceeded to take the lion's share of the credit for the innovative solution and the critical fix that had saved the project. I watched from the back of the room, seated amongst the other junior engineers, a familiar cold, hard knot forming in the pit of my stomach. The humiliation was a silent, bitter pill. Later that week, Sarah Miller, a whip-smart, no-nonsense senior female engineer who had informally mentored me, offering occasional guidance and a much-needed sympathetic ear, pulled me aside in the break room. "You need to learn to claim your successes, Maya, loudly and clearly." She said, her gaze direct but kind. "No one else is going to do it for you in this world, especially not when you're a woman in tech. Mark's a decent guy, but he's also ambitious. Don't make it easy for them to overlook you." Her words, blunt but true, stuck with me, a tiny seed of future resolve planting itself in my bruised ego. Family gatherings, Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays, even mundane Sunday dinners when I was in town, remained a recurring, predictable stage for this ongoing drama of differential validation. They all featured Alex now in his mid-20s and still living at home holding court regaling everyone with his increasingly mundane office triumphs as if they were epic sagas of corporate heroism. Closed a really big mortgage today, guys, 500,000 easy. Client was absolutely thrilled, said I was the best he'd ever worked with. He'd announce with a self-satisfied grin, and my parents would exchange proud knowing glances. Alex just has a way with people, my mother would sigh contentedly. When I, in turn, tried to talk about my work, perhaps developing sophisticated machine learning models to predict and neutralize network intrusions for a major e-commerce client complex, intellectually stimulating and undeniably vital work, I'd be met with polite, slightly blank stares and a palpable shift in the room's energy. "Oh, that sounds very complicated, dear," my mother would inevitably say, her smile strained. Then she'd quickly turn back to Alex. "Now tell us more about that difficult client you had last week, Alex. How did you manage to win him over? Your father was so impressed with how you handled that." My internal monologue during these formative years was a turbulent, exhausting mix of sharp frustration, a simmering, slow-burn resentment, and a persistent, gnawing self-doubt that whispered insidious questions in the quiet hours of the night. Am I not explaining myself clearly enough? Is my work truly so esoteric, so inherently uninteresting that no one can connect with it? Or is it simpler and more painful? Am I just not interesting? Is there something fundamentally lacking in me? The psychological impact was profound, a constant low-grade ache. I poured more and more of myself into my work, unconsciously seeking the validation and sense of accomplishment there that I couldn't seem to find anywhere else. If I just worked harder, achieved more, created something undeniably brilliant, surely then they would see. Surely then everyone would see my worth. It became a quiet obsession. One particularly telling dialogue, a perfect crystallization of this dynamic, unfolded during a weekend visit home about 3 years into my career. I just received and formally accepted the offer from Titan Tech, a dynamic, exciting, exceptionally well-funded startup helmed by the charismatic visionary CEO, Brandon Holt. I was genuinely excited, buzzing with anticipation. This felt different. This felt big. "I got a new job," I announced at the dinner table, trying to keep the tremor of excitement out of my voice. "Oh," my mother paused, her fork laden with mashed potatoes halfway to her mouth. Her first concern, as always, "Where is it, dear? Is it far from your apartment? The commute is so important." "It's actually downtown at a tech startup called Titan Tech. It's a fantastic opportunity. I'll be a senior AI architect working on developing next-generation cybersecurity systems." My father frowned slightly, dabbing his lips with his napkin. "A startup, Maya, is that truly stable? You had a good, steady job at Innovate. These startups, you know, they come and go like fireflies. A lot of hype, often not much substance." "This one is different, Dad, honestly. They're incredibly well-funded and they're really on to something potentially revolutionary. And the CEO, Brandon Holt, he's considered a genius in the Valley. He actually sought me out specifically for my published research on predictive threat analysis." I couldn't help the note of pride that crept in. Alex, busy scrolling through something on his phone, snorted without looking up. "Cybersecurity sounds pretty boring, May. Like glorified IT support, but with a much fancier, more pretentious title. Speaking of titles, I just got my team's quarterly sales figures in. We exceeded our targets by a solid 15% this quarter. Mr. Henderson, the regional vice president, personally called to congratulate me. Might be a bonus in the works." He finally looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. "Oh, that's absolutely wonderful, Alex, 15%. Mom beamed, her face lighting up. "Your father and I were just saying the other day how incredibly well you're doing at the bank. Such a responsible young man." The conversation, as it almost invariably did, pivoted seamlessly and entirely to Alex, his sales figures, his potential bonus, his insightful handling of a particularly tricky business loan application. My exciting new role, the personal recognition from a highly respected CEO, the cutting-edge field I was about to enter, all of it was instantly reduced to a risky, obscure, and vaguely boring venture. The familiar sting was sharper this time, more acute. I was an adult, a highly skilled professional earning a six-figure salary, yet in their eyes I was somehow still the quiet kid with the overly complicated, slightly puzzling science project. At Titan Tech in those initial heady months, things genuinely felt different. Brandon Holt was everything my previous managers weren't: charismatic, articulate, and he seemed genuinely deeply impressed by my ideas and my technical acumen. He painted a dazzling picture of relentless innovation of a company poised to literally change the world. Maya, he'd said in my final interview, his eyes gleaming with an almost messianic enthusiasm that was hard to resist. Your published work on predictive threat analysis, your entire approach to AI-driven defense, is precisely what Titan Tech needs to leapfrog the competition. We're not just building products here. We're building the future of digital security, and you are key to that vision. For the first time in my professional life, I felt truly seen, truly valued by someone in a significant position of power. I threw myself heart and soul into the monumental challenge he presented to conceive and build from the ground up a revolutionary AI-driven cybersecurity system. I poured all my intellect, my creativity, my hopes into it. I named it Sentinel Shield. The most recent major disappointment, the one that pricked the iridescent bubble of hope that Titan Tech had so carefully inflated, happened about a year into the intensive development of Sentinel Shield. I'd achieved a hugely significant internal milestone, a robust proof of concept that definitively demonstrated the core AI was not only viable, but incredibly powerful, far exceeding our initial projections. I presented it to Brandon in his office, my hands slightly trembling as I walked him through the data. He was impressed, genuinely effusive in his praise. Incredible, Maya, absolutely incredible. This is even better than I dared to hope. He promised a significant public acknowledgement, a company-wide announcement celebrating the breakthrough, maybe even a press release hinting at our progress. It never came. Instead, a few weeks later at a packed all-hands meeting, Brandon spoke eloquently about our amazing dedicated R&D team's phenomenal progress. In very general, vague terms, never once mentioning my name or the specific game-changing breakthrough I had delivered. When I privately, politely, and somewhat nervously asked him about it afterwards, he waved a dismissive, almost impatient hand. "Oh, Maya, optics. We need to manage the optics carefully. Can't show all our cards to the competition too early. Just keep up the fantastic work, though. You're absolutely essential to this project." Essential, apparently, but not essential enough to be publicly named or individually credited. It was a familiar, chilling sensation, a small but significant crack appearing in the gleaming facade of Titan Tech's brilliance and Brandon Holt's mentorship. That subtle but undeniable slight, combined with the lingering sting of that earlier family dinner, left me feeling more fiercely determined than ever to make Sentinel Shield an undeniable, irrefutable success, a creation so brilliant, so impactful, that no one could ever ignore, downplay, or sideline its creator again. Little did I know that familiar pattern of denial and dismissal was about to escalate into something far more sinister, outright calculated theft. And little did they know I was already quietly preparing for war. The subsequent 18 months I spent breathing life into Sentinel Shield became a relentless, all-consuming vortex of intense focus. My world shrank to the glowing characters on my multiple monitors, the complex diagrams covering my whiteboards, and the endless cups of rapidly cooling black coffee. I was fueled by a potent cocktail of caffeine raw ambition, and that deep, persistent, almost primal ache to prove myself beyond any shadow of a doubt. Brandon Holt in those early stages of the core development was the consummate motivator, the charismatic conductor leading his orchestra of one. He'd frequently swing by my sparsely decorated lab, a converted storage room I'd claimed appreciating its quiet isolation, his energy infectious, his enthusiasm a powerful stimulant. "Maya, you're an absolute rock star. This isn't just code. This is artistry. This is game-changing," he'd exclaim after I demonstrated a particularly elegant solution to a complex algorithmic problem or showcased a successful simulation against a new threat vector. His praise initially felt like the warm, nourishing validation I'd craved for so long, a balm to old wounds. I poured everything I had and then some into Sentinel Shield. My waking hours, my dream-filled nights, my weekends, my very soul. It wasn't just a project. It was rapidly becoming an extension of my intellect, my creativity, my very being. I remember him specifically saying, "When this launches, Maya, your name will be synonymous with next-gen AI security. We'll make sure of that." A promise that in hindsight dripped with unintended irony. My lab smelled of old coffee ozone from the servers and the faint sweet scent of the cheap air freshener I used to try and mask the fact it was windowless. Then about 6 months deep into the project during a late-night debugging session, when the rest of the office was dark and silent, something unsettling, almost subliminal happened. I was running a series of intricate diagnostics on Sentinel Shield's learning algorithms, tracing data flows, when I noticed unusual fleeting activity logs on my primary development server. It was almost imperceptible. A ghost login from an internal, high-privilege admin-level IP address, brief targeted access to my core architecture directories, the very heart of Sentinel Shield's design, then gone vanished like a wisp of smoke. My stomach clenched into a tight, cold knot. This wasn't a routine system sweep. I knew what those looked like. This felt different, targeted, surgical. I immediately reported it to Titan Tech's IT department, specifically to Kevin Tanaka, the usually jovial and helpful senior network administrator. This time, however, Kevin was oddly evasive, his gaze shifting uncomfortably. Yeah, probably just a scheduled system integrity scan, Maya," he mumbled, not quite meeting my eyes. "Standard procedure. Nothing to worry your pretty little head about." His dismissive tone, the forced casualness, set my internal alarm bells jangling furiously. A cold, insidious suspicion began to worm its way into the forefront of my mind. Why would an administrator need silent, unannounced, high-level access to my raw, in-progress development files without so much as a courtesy notification? It made no sense unless someone wanted to see the raw blueprints without the architect knowing. That night I went home and couldn't sleep. The trust I'd placed in Brandon and Titan Tech felt suddenly fragile. I started taking meticulous, encrypted off-site private backups of my entire codebase, my detailed design documents, my research notes, every significant email exchange with Brandon regarding milestones, features, and his explicit approval of my architectural decisions. And more crucially, I began to think about safeguards. Not just safeguards for the system's eventual external users against outside threats, but safeguards for the system itself, and by extension, its creator against potential internal threats. It was then in those shadowed hours of doubt that I began to conceive and subtly embed a hidden integrity protocol deep within Sentinel Shield's core operating system. A sophisticated, multi-layered kill switch data logger and ownership verifier that would activate only under very specific, highly unethical conditions, such as an unauthorized attempt to copy, modify core parameters, or claim sole operational control of the system without the presence of my unique, multi-factor cryptographic key. It was my secret, deeply buried insurance policy, a digital dead man's switch. I hoped I'd never need it. As Sentinel Shield neared its full operational capability, displaying an almost uncanny ability to predict and neutralize even zero-day threats, in simulations the pressure from Brandon intensified, becoming almost unbearable. Kestrel Group, a behemoth in the venture capital world, a kingmaker in Silicon Valley, was sniffing around Titan Tech, their interest piqued by industry whispers of a revolutionary AI brewing in our labs. They were promising a colossal Series B funding, around the kind that catapults startups into tech superstardom if Titan Tech could deliver a truly groundbreaking market-ready product. Brandon, who had once been so collaborative and encouraging, morphed subtly. He became more demanding, his visits to my lab less about genuine encouragement and more about tight deadlines and investor expectations. The Kestrel Group demo has to be absolutely flawless. Maya. Perfect. Our entire future. The future of this company rides on this single presentation. He'd say, his jaw tight, his eyes holding a new, harder gleam I hadn't seen before. The friendly, inspiring mentor was rapidly receding, replaced by a driven, almost desperate-looking chief executive. My internal alarms, already primed and sensitized by the unsettling server incident months prior, began to ring with a new, insistent urgency. I noticed Andrea Fields, Titan Tech's sleek, formidable, and perpetually unreadable legal counsel, started attending more of Brandon's update meetings with me. Her presence, a silent, observing weight in the room. She rarely spoke, but her eyes missed nothing. During one particularly stressful week, pushing towards a critical internal deadline for a feature freeze, I was running on fumes, averaging maybe 4 hours of sleep a night. I called my mother, not for technical advice, obviously, but just hoping for a moment of simple, uncomplicated human connection, a brief respite. "I'm so exhausted, Mom," I confessed, leaning my head against the cool glass of my office window, watching the distant city lights blur. "This project is absolutely monumental, bigger than anything I've ever done, but I really think it's going to be incredible when it's finished." "Oh, that's nice, dear," she replied, her voice unmistakably distracted the faint sound of a television in the background. "That's good you're busy. Did I tell you Alex is thinking of buying a new car? A German one, a BMW, I think?" "Very impressive. He took your father for a test drive last weekend. Your father said it was like sitting in a spaceship. They were like two little boys with a brand new toy, honestly." The familiar dull pang like a bruise being pressed. That's great for Alex, Mom. Really. This AI system I'm building, though, it's designed to protect millions of people, hospitals, financial institutions from crippling cyber attacks. My voice trailed off. "Yes, well, just try not to work too hard, Maya, dear. You always get so terribly wrapped up in that computer nonsense. It can't be healthy. Make sure you're eating properly and getting some fresh air." Click. The line went dead before I could even say goodbye. It was such a small thing, a typical interaction, yet it solidified a growing steely resolve deep within me. I would not be dismissed. My work mattered profoundly. And if my own family, the people who were supposed to cherish my endeavors, couldn't or wouldn't see its significance, then I would make damn sure the rest of the world, and especially Brandon Holt, would. My parents, I realized with a sudden piercing and surprisingly liberating sadness, were so deeply enmeshed in their own inherited narratives of what constituted real success, narratives largely shaped by my father's deep-seated risk-averse nature, a direct consequence of his own father's financial ruin, and my mother's unwavering adherence to traditional predefined gender roles that they were structurally incapable of truly understanding or appreciating my world, my passion. My father's father, a once prosperous tailor, had indeed lost everything in a speculative land deal gone sour. For my father, stability wasn't just a preference, it was his god. My mother, raised by a formidable woman who believed a woman's greatest achievement was a successful husband and impeccably well-behaved children, simply didn't possess the mental programming to process a daughter who found more joy in elegant algorithms than in elegant dinner parties. My brother Alex, with his conventional job and easily digestible ambitions, fit their comfortable mold perfectly. I was the anomaly, the system error they didn't have the software to debug or comprehend. The fourth wave of escalation, the one that propelled everything towards its inevitable explosive climax, came with breathtaking, almost dizzying speed. We decided to run a final, full-scale, no-holds-barred simulation, a highly sophisticated, multi-vector, state-sponsored level cyber attack, the kind that had recently crippled major corporations and even government agencies, costing billions. I designed the attack parameters myself, making it as brutal and relentless as possible. Sentinel Shield didn't just deflect it, it absorbed it, analyzed it, learned from its patterns, reconfigured its defenses in real time, and then effectively neutralized it all within minutes. It was flawless. More than flawless, ma'am. It was magnificent. A surge of pure, unadulterated exhilaration coursed through me, so potent it made me lightheaded. This was it. My creation wasn't just code. It was alive, intelligent, and incredibly powerful. I immediately shot off an email to Brandon, copying Rachel, his assistant, and Andrea Fields requesting an urgent meeting to present the final spectacular results. My heart was thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird, a wild, chaotic mixture of immense pride and a strangely nervous, almost fearful anticipation. This was the culmination of everything, every sacrifice, every late night, every dismissed idea from my past. This was the moment I'd finally get the unambiguous, undeniable recognition I so deeply deserved. I allowed myself just for a moment to envision a company-wide email from Brandon, a celebratory toast with champagne, perhaps even a serious, substantive discussion about me leading the new dedicated Sentinel Shield division as its chief architect or even a VP. As I meticulously prepared my presentation slides, compiling the compelling data and the stunning visualizations of Sentinel Shield's performance, I thought back to Sarah Miller, my old mentor from Innovate Solutions. Claim your successes, Maya, loudly. I also thought with a renewed chill about Kevin Tanaka from IT, his shifty eyes and evasive answers when I'd pressed him about that unauthorized server access so many months ago. Don't worry about it, he'd said, but I had worried, and I had meticulously, quietly, comprehensively prepared. My internal transformation, a slow burn over years of quiet slights and professional frustrations, was nearing its critical flashpoint. The quiet, overlooked girl who preferred books to people was still a part of me, but now she stood shoulder to shoulder with a woman who understood the brutal game of corporate chess and was no longer remotely afraid to play and play to win. Allies were few and uncertain. Perhaps some of the junior engineers I'd mentored and shielded from office politics who looked up to me with a mixture of awe and gratitude. Enemies Brandon Holt was rapidly morphing from a charismatic mentor into a dangerous, unpredictable variable. And Andrea Fields Titan Tech's sleek, ever-present, formidable legal counsel always seemed to be lurking in the periphery of important meetings, her expression as coolly unreadable as encrypted code, her loyalty clearly and exclusively to Titan Tech's bottom line, and by extension to Brandon. I sensed she was an enemy or at least a significant obstacle. The stakes, I knew, couldn't possibly be higher. Sentinel Shield wasn't just another innovative product. It was Titan Tech's golden ticket, their moonshot, their claim to legendary status in the tech firmament. And it was unequivocally my masterpiece. The day of the presentation arrived a crisp, bright Tuesday morning. I took several deep, steadying breaths, smoothed down the front of my best navy blue blazer, and clutched my encrypted laptop, its contents representing the culmination of 18 grueling months of my life. I walked into Brandon's expansive, sun-drenched corner office, my carefully prepared presentation ready, my mind rehearsing the key talking points. I was expecting, at the very least, heartfelt congratulations, perhaps even that long-deferred discussion about my future leading this new vital division. What I got instead felt like a precision-guided, armor-piercing missile aimed directly at the heart of everything I'd worked for, everything I was. Brandon wasn't alone. My stomach lurched. Andrea Fields stood beside his massive mahogany desk, a thick leather-bound folio clutched in her perfectly manicured hands, her expression as coolly welcoming as an executioner's veiled gaze. The air in the room suddenly felt 20 degrees colder. Maya. Brandon began, his voice devoid of its usual warmth, its familiar, encouraging cadence. Instead, it was tinged with a strange, cool, almost rehearsed formality that sent a shiver of pure dread down my spine. Thank you for coming in. And thank you for your considerable work on the Sentinel Shield project. It's complete. He paused his gaze, flicking uncomfortably towards Andrea, a silent, almost imperceptible cue. Andrea Field stepped forward slightly, her heels clicking sharply on the polished hardwood floor. Maya Lynn. She stated, her voice as crisp and emotionless as a legal disclaimer. As per Section 4, Subsection B, Paragraph 3 of your signed employment agreement, all intellectual property innovations and creations developed during your tenure at Titan Tech are and shall remain the sole and exclusive property of the company. Brandon cleared his throat, a small nervous sound. Therefore, he continued, finally meeting my eyes with a look that was a chilling cocktail of feigned regret and steely resolve. We've made the strategic decision that your role here at Titan Tech is concluded. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. The words, so casually delivered, hit me with the physical force of a sledgehammer stealing the breath from my lungs, making the sunlit room tilt and swim before my eyes. Terminated now. After delivering the crown jewels, after everything, it was the ultimate dismissal, the most profound and brutal invalidation I had ever experienced. The very air in the opulent office crackled with a tension so thick, so suffocating, I could barely draw a proper breath. And little did they know, as they stood there in their smug, premeditated certainty, this was just the beginning of their rapidly escalating, very public problems. The game wasn't over. I had just been dealt a devastating hand, but I had an ace, a very powerful ace, hidden up my sleeve. The silence that descended upon Brandon's opulent corner office stretched taut and suffocating like a rubber band pulled to its absolute breaking point. My mind, usually a swift, logical processor of complex data, reeled in chaotic disbelief. Terminated, fired. After delivering a system that was, by Brandon's own admission, about to make them untold millions, potentially billions. After I had literally handed them the keys to the kingdom. The initial shock was a searing, white-hot flash instantly followed by a chilling, dreadfully familiar cold that seeped into my very bones. This wasn't just a brutal professional setback. This was the ultimate calculated act of erasure, a devastating echo of every single time in my life I'd been minimized, my contributions absorbed without acknowledgement, and then casually forgotten, as if they and I had never existed. Brandon, perhaps misinterpreting my stunned, frozen silence for bewildered acquiescence or intimidated compliance, continued, his voice regaining some of its usual smooth, practiced confidence, the predatory sheen returning to his eyes. Sentinel Shield is, of course, as Andrea stated, the exclusive intellectual property of Titan Tech. Your employment agreement, which you signed upon joining us, is unequivocally clear on that, Maya. Andrea has it all outlined meticulously. He gestured vaguely, almost dismissively, towards the ominous leather-bound folio clutched in her hand. We do naturally appreciate the considerable hours you've put in on this project. The condescension was a fresh stab. Andrea Field's cool, precise, and utterly unmoved picked up the narrative seamlessly, like a well-rehearsed tag team. Titan Tech is prepared, Ms. Lynn, to offer you what we consider to be a significant success bonus in recognition of your prolonged dedication and effort during the intensive development phase of Sentinel Shield. She slid a single crisp sheet of high-quality paper across the vast expanse of the polished mahogany desk. It landed with a soft, final thud. $300,000, a very generous severance package, Ms. Lynn, considering the circumstances and the terms of your contract. Her smile was thin, a mere upturn of her lips, devoid of any warmth or humanity. My eyes flicked momentarily to the offensively inadequate sum typed on the paper, then snapped back to Brandon's expectant face. Generous, for my soul, for the intricate, groundbreaking system that was my intellectual blood, sweat tears, and 18 months of my irreplaceable life, for the very thing that was about to make him a legend and them obscenely wealthy. It wasn't generous. It was an insult of epic proportions, a calculated affront wrapped in a pathetically inadequate pittance designed to add ultimate injury to the initial betrayal. We're scheduled to demo Sentinel Shield to the Kestrel Group investors first thing tomorrow morning. Brandon added a disturbing, almost feverish gleam of triumph in his eyes that I'd either never noticed before or more likely had naively chosen to ignore. It's going to make Titan Tech the undisputed global leader in cybersecurity overnight. This is a monumental company triumph, Maya, the culmination of our vision. His triumph he clearly meant. My name, my 18 months of relentless, often solitary innovation, my very essence that was woven into every line of Sentinel Shield's code were clearly intended to be at best a forgotten footnote, or more likely completely and utterly erased from the official record. I would become a ghost. The accumulated weight of years of slights, the sting of that fourth-grade science fair, the endless dismissive comments about my computer nonsense, the consistently overshadowed achievements my old manager Mark brazenly taking credit for my algorithm, Brandon's own earlier, more subtle snubs and broken promises regarding public acknowledgement, they all coalesced in that blinding, agonizing moment into a single sharp, incandescent point of pure, unadulterated fury. But it wasn't a loud, messy, theatrical rage. It was far more dangerous. It was a cold, diamond-hard, laser-focused resolve. They thought I was just another naive, expendable coder they could exploit drain dry and then casually discard like yesterday's news. They thought I was still the same quiet, yielding, conflict-averse Maya, who would just absorb the devastating blow sign their insulting NDA, take their Judas money, and disappear silently into the night. They thought I hadn't learned a single damned thing from a lifetime of being underestimated, overlooked, and undervalued. They were so wrong. My internal monologue, usually a complex tapestry of self-doubt and over-analysis, was suddenly shockingly sharp, clear, and icily calm. They actually think this is checkmate. They genuinely believe they've won, that I have no moves left. They've factored in my presumed passivity. But what they don't know, what they couldn't possibly fathom, is that the unauthorized clandestine server access from months ago wasn't just a forgotten blip on my radar, a minor anomaly I'd simply reported and then dismissed. It was my personal, irrevocable trigger event. It was the moment I realized I wasn't just building a shield to protect vast corporate networks from external malicious threats. I was subconsciously at first and then with deliberate intent also building one to protect its creator from far more insidious internal ones. The profound realization hit me with the undeniable force of a divine revelation. My carefully crafted, deeply hidden safeguards, the multi-layered integrity protocol that I'd painstakingly, almost obsessively woven into the very fabric, the DNA of Sentinel Shield, were about to take center stage. This wasn't just a revolutionary software system, it was my silent, incorruptible digital witness. The game hadn't ended with their treacherous move. It had just dramatically, irrevocably changed boards, and I, Maya Lynn, the supposedly neutralized pawn, held the utterly unexpected, game-changing queen. A strange, almost preternatural calm settled over me, pushing aside the initial shock and the searing rage. There was no need to scream or plead or engage in a futile emotional argument. My work, my meticulous preparation would do all the talking far more eloquently and damningly than I ever could. My foresight, born from a deep-seated, hard-earned suspicion and a lifetime of needing to fiercely protect my own intellectual contributions, was complete and ready to deploy. The decision to act to embed those safeguards had been made in principle months ago when I first wrote those specific lines of defensive code, designing them for exactly this kind of worst-case, unthinkable contingency. The only planning needed now was to maintain my composure, to feign defeat, to let them walk blindly and arrogantly straight into the elegant, inescapable trap I hadn't even known for sure I was setting until this very gut-wrenching moment. I looked from Brandon's smugly expectant face to Andrea's coolly indifferent, almost bored one. I allowed a small, almost imperceptible sigh to escape my lips, a subtle flicker of what they would undoubtedly interpret as weary resignation, perhaps even despair. "Okay, Brandon," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, even eerily quiet, betraying none of the maelstrom raging within me. "If that's your final decision." I didn't even bother to glance at the severance paper again, that insulting scrap. I simply turned with a manufactured weariness and walked slowly out of his office, leaving them to their brief, pathetically ill-fated, and soon-to-be-shattered moment of perceived triumph. As I walked with measured steps through the suddenly silent, open-plan office, past the sea of curious, quickly averted glances from my now former colleagues, a single potent thought echoed, resonated, and pulsed in my mind. Tomorrow. Tomorrow morning is going to be very, very interesting indeed. They were about to demo Sentinel Shield, my Sentinel Shield, and it was going to perform exactly, precisely, and devastatingly as I'd meticulously designed it to, with unimpeachable absolute integrity. The anticipation was a tight, vibrating coil in my chest, not of fear, not anymore, but of a kind of righteous, controlled, and long overdue power. The real truth bomb wasn't my termination. That was just the fuse. The truth bomb itself was still ticking, armed and set to detonate with spectacular precision in less than 24 hours, directly in front of their most important high-stakes audience. Let the games begin. The next morning, the sun streamed into my small apartment with an almost mocking cheerfulness. I wasn't at Titan Tech, of course. I was ensconced in my makeshift command center, my sofa, nursing a mug of scalding, strong black coffee, my personal laptop open and glowing. I was connected via a heavily encrypted, multiply redundant, and completely anonymized backdoor I'd meticulously built into Sentinel Shield's deepest diagnostic layer, a backdoor whose existence was known only to me, its architect. I had a perfect, high-definition front-row seat, digitally speaking, to the much-vaunted Kestrel Group demo. My stomach was a roiling knot of carefully suppressed nerves, yes, but also a steely, almost thrilling electric anticipation. Karma, I mused, taking a slow sip of coffee, sometimes needed a little nudge, a little assistance from a few thousand lines of exceptionally well-written, ethically bound code. The main conference room at Titan Tech, I knew from countless prior presentations, would be buzzing with a manufactured high-stakes energy. It was their largest, most impressive space, equipped with a state-of-the-art wall-size projection system, plush leather chairs, and an aura of moneyed importance. Brandon Holt would be in his absolute element, impeccably tailored power suit, confident million-dollar smile firmly in place, effortlessly schmoozing the assembled Kestrel Group partners, men and women who held the fate of startups like Titan Tech in their well-manicured hands. Andrea Fields, ever the loyal enforcer, would be at his side, sharp, watchful, radiating an aura of impenetrable legal authority. Key department heads, the VP of Engineering, the head of sales, the CFO, would be strategically positioned in the front rows, their faces a mixture of forced optimism and palpable anxiety. And Rachel Brandon's perpetually stressed, long-suffering but incredibly efficient executive assistant would be orchestrating the complex logistics with military precision, probably with a discreet headset and a constantly updated digital clipboard. Through my secure, high-resolution video and audio feed, I watched as Brandon took center stage, basking in the glow of the spotlights. His voice, artificially amplified by the room's sophisticated sound system, boomed with a carefully manufactured, infectious enthusiasm. Ladies and gentlemen of Kestrel Group, a very warm welcome. Today, you are about to witness not just an evolution, but a revolution. You are about to see the undisputed future of cybersecurity, a truly revolutionary artificial intelligence, conceived, architected, and painstakingly developed right here within the innovative halls of Titan Tech, an AI that will, without exaggeration, render all previous digital defense systems instantly obsolete. I give you Sentinel Shield, He was a master showman, I had to grudgingly give him that. He smoothly, brazenly took all the credit, painting himself as the singular visionary, the grand architect of this marvel, his brilliant and tireless team, merely a faceless, monolithic entity that had diligently executed his grand, singular design. My name, Maya Lynn. The actual architect and creator was, as I had fully and painfully expected, conspicuously, utterly absent from his grandiloquent narrative. It was as if I had never existed. The demo began. A complex simulated corporate network environment flashed onto the giant screen, complete with multiple servers, workstations, and data repositories. Brandon, with a dramatic flourish and a confident click of his remote, initiated a series of pre-scripted, increasingly sophisticated mock cyber attacks. Aggressive ransomware, a massive distributed denial of service. DDoS attack, a cunningly disguised spear phishing attempt aimed at a virtual C-level executive. Initially, for the first few minutes, Sentinel Shield performed beautifully, just as it always did. Its elegant, intuitive interface displayed the incoming threats, being identified, analyzed, and neutralized in milliseconds, all in seamless real time. I could almost feel Brandon physically puffing up with pride, his smile widening. The Kestrel investors were visibly impressed, leaning forward in their seats, murmuring appreciative comments to one another. So far, so good. For them. Then, precisely as I had meticulously programmed it months ago, came the critical juncture, the carefully laid tripwire. Brandon attempting to showcase a deep system administrative function, essentially demonstrating his, and therefore Titan Tech's absolute unfettered, total control over the valuable intellectual property, entered a specific command sequence. A sequence that, unbeknownst to him, his head of engineering, or anyone else in that room, was one of my primary unalterable triggers for the integrity protocol. A sequence that explicitly attempted to bypass creator-level security overrides without the authenticated cryptographic key. Suddenly, dramatically, the main display flickered violently. Bright, angry red warning icons began to flash insistently across the screen. A jarring, high-pitched, klaxon-like alarm, soft at first, then rapidly growing in intensity and urgency, echoed ominously from the conference room speakers. A sound effect I'd personally chosen from a stock audio library for its scientifically proven ability to induce immediate acute anxiety. The elegant, sophisticated Sentinel Shield interface dissolved, melting away, as if consumed by a digital fire replaced by stark, imposing, blocky white text on a blood-red background. Critical integrity breach detected. Code Red System Sentinel. Shield v1.0 lead architect and primary creator, M. Lynn Titan. Tech Employee ID, R7743 Threat Origin Internal, Titan Tech Corporate Network Nature of Threat, Unauthorized Attempt to Assert Sole Ownership and Control, Suspected Action, Fraudulent Intellectual Property Appropriation in Progress Logging Source Terminal Identifier, CEO/Holt Office, Mainframe, Cross-Referencing, Titan Tech Employment Agreement Clause 7.3 Joint IP Rights, Violation Detected, Cross-Referencing Creator Termination Protocol, Lynn 24 ERS Prior, Malfeasance Likely, Immediate Action Core System Lockdown Initiated, Full Diagnostic and Forensic Report Generating, Unredacted Creator Notification Sent, All Further System Access Denied Without Creator, Level Cryptographic Key Verification. Brandon stared, mouth agape, his face instantly draining of all color, leaving it a pasty, sickly gray. His confident smile had vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, uncomprehending horror. Andrea Fields went deathly rigid beside him, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying understanding. The Kestrel investors exchanged confused, then alarmed, then distinctly angry glances. A wave of agitated murmurs, then louder, more concerned voices rippled through the previously silent, rapt room. What in God's name is this?" Brandon stammered, his hand fumbling uselessly with the keyboard, his voice a choked, incredulous whisper. "A glitch? A sophisticated virus sabotage?" He shot a wild, panicked look at his head of engineering, a man named Dave Hessland, who looked utterly, completely bewildered and was already turning a shade of green. My burner phone, clutched in my sweaty palm, buzzed sharply. It was Rachel, Brandon's assistant, as I knew it would be. Her voice was tight, high-pitched, with barely suppressed panic. "Maya, oh my God, Maya, is that you? You need to get down here, right now, immediately. Sentinel Shield it's gone completely crazy. It's accusing Brandon of stuff. The investors are freaking out. He's losing it. He's screaming. Please, Maya, please." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Rachel," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, even cool. A small, grim, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. Theatrics, after all, weren't just for CEOs trying to steal their employees' life's work. Sometimes the true artist saved their best performance for the grand, unexpected finale. I took my time. I finished my coffee. I even reapplied my lipstick. When I finally calmly walked into that chaotic, tension-filled conference room, precisely 19 minutes later, the atmosphere was thick enough to cut with a knife. A noxious blend of panic, recrimination, and pure, unadulterated fear. All eyes, hundreds of them, snapped to me the instant I stepped through the door. Brandon looked like he'd aged 20 years in 20 minutes. His expensive suit rumpled his hair askew, his face a mask of fury and utter desperation. The Kestrel Group investors were on their feet, clustered together, their expressions a mixture of outrage and grim curiosity. Ms. Albright, their lead partner, looked particularly incensed. "Maya!" Brandon almost shrieked, his carefully constructed composure completely shattered, his voice cracking. "What in God's name is wrong with your insane system? You built this thing. Fix it. Fix it now. This is a disaster." I walked slowly, deliberately towards the main console, my expression deliberately, carefully, neutral, projecting an aura of calm competence amidst the swirling chaos. "Fix what, Brandon?" I asked, my voice carrying easily, surprisingly clearly, in the stunned, sudden silence that fell upon my question. "As far as I can ascertain, Sentinel Shield is functioning precisely, impeccably as designed. Its core operational programming includes a multi-layered, non-negotiable integrity protocol. It's specifically designed to detect, flag, and counter any unethical attempts to misappropriate its intellectual property or to compromise its operational control and core programming without proper authenticated authorization. Specifically, my authorization as its acknowledged architect and primary developer." I turned then to face the Kestrel investors directly. "Gentlemen, ladies," I said, my voice firm and clear, "what you're currently witnessing is Sentinel Shield identifying what it perceives as a significant high-level internal threat to its own operational integrity and rightful ownership. It appears to have logged a systematic attempt by Mr. Holt to assert sole unverified control and fraudulent ownership over the entire system, an attempt initiated subsequent to my rather abrupt, unconventional, and procedurally questionable termination yesterday afternoon. A termination, I might add, that occurred mere hours after I successfully delivered the final, fully functional, and demonstrably revolutionary version of Sentinel Shield. Andrea Fields finally found her voice, though it was strained several octaves higher than usual. "This is utterly absurd, preposterous. This is blatant sabotage, corporate espionage. Is it Andrea?" I countered, my voice hardening, a steely edge creeping in. "Or is it simply exceptionally good ethical and prescient design? Perhaps you recall the unauthorized high-level administrative access to my primary development server several months ago, the one that IE, on your likely instruction, dismissed as a routine scan." "I do. I have the immutable server logs time-stamped and verified. That disturbing incident is precisely when I realized with a rather sinking heart that Sentinel Shield needed robust protection, not just from external anonymous hackers, but potentially, and tragically, from internal named ones too." I calmly walked to the console, unplugged Brandon's useless keyboard, and plugged my personal, heavily encrypted drive into a vacant USB port. With a few swift practice keystrokes, I overrode the system lockdown using my unique multi-factor cryptographic key. Of course, a key that changed dynamically every 60 seconds and brought up my own meticulously organized files on the massive main screen for all to see. Clear, undeniable timestamp server logs from Titan Tech's own internal systems, showing the unauthorized administrative access to my directories complete with the source IP traced back to a terminal used by senior management. My detailed daily development journals meticulously outlining every stage of Sentinel Shield's conception and creation, every innovation, every breakthrough, every problem solved, all clearly attributed and dated many entries, including screenshots of code and diagrams. Copies of early email exchanges and Slack messages between myself and Brandon Holt, where he himself repeatedly, effusively praised my specific individual contributions and innovative ideas as foundational, brilliant, and absolutely essential to the Sentinel Shield project. A scanned copy of my original employment contract with Titan Tech with the often overlooked but absolutely crucial clause, Clause 7.3, which I'd quietly but firmly negotiated with HR before signing, clearly highlighted stipulating joint intellectual property rights and co-creator status for any novel inventions, systems, or algorithms developed by the employee that significantly extend beyond the initial defined job scope and contribute foundational unique IP to the company. Sentinel Shield clearly massively qualified. And finally, for the devastating coup de grace, a side-by-side display, a scanned copy of my termination letter signed by Brandon, dated yesterday, juxtaposed with the final project completion report for Sentinel Shield, also signed off by Brandon, dated just 2 hours prior to my termination. The implication was stark, brutal, and undeniable. The evidence was irrefutable, a meticulously documented indictment laid bare for everyone in that room, especially the increasingly horrified and visibly disgusted Kestrel Group partners, to see. The power dynamic in the room didn't just shift, it seismically, irrevocably inverted. Brandon was sputtering his face now, a mottled purple, utterly incoherent words failing him. Andrea Fields was deathly pale. Her usual, icy composure completely shattered her eyes, darting around like a trapped animal. The other Titan Tech executives looked like they wanted the earth to swallow them whole. One of the lead Kestrel investors, the stern-faced, formidable Ms. Eleanor Albright, who had remained silent and observant throughout my presentation, finally spoke, her voice like chips of glacial ice. "Mr. Holt, Ms. Fields, perhaps you and your legal counsel would care to explain this rather glaring discrepancy, this mountain of evidence." And Ms. Lynn, she turned to me, a new profound, almost awed respect dawning in her sharp eyes. "Perhaps you would care to tell us in no uncertain terms what you believe would constitute a fair and equitable resolution to this extraordinary situation." The confrontation hadn't been loud or hysterical on my part. It was a calm, precise, factual demolition executed with surgical precision. My triumph wasn't in shouting or recrimination, but in the cold, hard, irrefutable truth of my meticulous preparation and the elegant, devastating execution of my digital countermove. In that singular, crystallizing moment, watching Brandon Holt visibly deflate like a punctured Michelin man, watching Andrea Fields squirm under the weight of her complicity, it wasn't just about Sentinel Shield. It was for every single time I'd been overlooked, for every brilliant science fair project dismissed with an absent-minded pat on the head, for every hard-won achievement downplayed or ignored in favor of my brother's mediocre efforts. It was the quiet girl, the overlooked coder, finally, unequivocally, powerfully claiming her space, her voice, and her undeniable genius on a global stage. The profound public humiliation of Brandon Holt and Andrea Fields was merely an unavoidable, if deeply satisfying byproduct of them underestimating me one critical time too many. Justice, I discovered in that moment, wasn't just served. It was meticulously coded, brilliantly compiled, and flawlessly, spectacularly executed. The air in the Titan Tech conference room, now thick with the acrid scent of detonated ambition and exposed deceit, thrummed with the immediate chaotic fallout. Ms. Albright of Kestrel Group, a woman whose steely gaze could make CEOs tremble, didn't mince a single word. "Mr. Holt, Miss Fields," she declared, her voice resonating with cold authority. "I strongly suggest we adjourn this demonstration or whatever it has become. My team and I will require an immediate, private, and very thorough discussion with Ms. Lynn. Immediately. And then rest assured we will be having a very, very serious conversation with Titan Tech's board of directors. Assuming, of course, there's a viable Titan Tech left to talk to after this appalling debacle." Her pronouncement hung in the suddenly frigid air like a freshly sharpened guillotine's blade, promising swift and brutal consequences. Brandon utterly deflated his face, a mask of shocked disbelief, and rapidly dawning sickening panic could only manage a weak, jerky nod. The fight had visibly drained out of him, replaced by a ghastly pallor. Andrea Fields, ever the corporate soldier, even in defeat, attempted a weak, last-ditch protest, her voice thin and reedy. "Now, Ms. Albright, I'm absolutely certain this is all just a terrible misunderstanding, a miscommunication that we can easily clear up with a little more. The only thing that is abundantly clear, Ms. Fields," Ms. Albright cut her off sharply, her eyes flashing with contempt, "is that Kestrel Group was presented with a profoundly, perhaps even fraudulently misleading picture of this company and its supposed innovations. Ms. Lynn." She turned to me, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. "If you'll be so kind as to come with us." It was less a request, more a command cloaked in politeness. I spent the next 2 intense, almost surreal hours cloistered in a separate, smaller meeting room with the full Kestrel Group executive team. They weren't just interested in the technical marvel that was Sentinel Shield. They were utterly fascinated, almost awestruck by the mind that had not only conceived and built it, but had also possessed the astonishing foresight and steely nerve to protect it so comprehensively and effectively. They grilled me not unkindly, but with relentless precision on every aspect of the technology, my long-term vision for its future development and ethical deployment, and with a kind of amazed, almost disbelieving respect, the intricate design and flawless execution of the integrity protocol. They wanted to know everything. I answered every question calmly, factually, and thoroughly. Meanwhile, a veritable storm of chaos and recrimination reigned elsewhere throughout Titan Tech's usually calm, minimalist offices. Whispers turned to shocked exclamations as news of the demo disaster spread like wildfire. Brandon Holt was reportedly holed up in his expansive office, his door firmly shut, alternating between furious shouted tirades at his few remaining loyal senior staff and making increasingly frantic, desperate calls to individual board members trying to spin his version of events. Andrea Fields, I later heard, was in full frenetic damage control mode, attempting to craft and disseminate a plausible narrative of a regrettable internal miscommunication and a disgruntled, possibly unstable former employee. But the irrefutable evidence I'd displayed on that giant screen was too stark, too public, too damning. The investors, the people with the real power, had seen it all with their own eyes. There was no spinning this. By late that afternoon, the lawyers were officially involved. My hastily hired but utterly brilliant and reassuringly expensive intellectual property attorney, Sarah Chen, a formidable litigator who'd been highly recommended by my old mentor, Sarah Miller, who upon hearing a garbled, excited summary from me had simply said, "Get Chen. She eats people like Holt for breakfast." On the other side was Titan Tech's now thoroughly chastened and visibly stressed internal legal team, clearly operating under extreme duress from both a panicking Brandon and the increasingly impatient and frankly disgusted Kestrel Group. The negotiations were surprisingly swift and undeniably brutal, primarily because I, through Sarah Chen, held all the high cards. Sentinel Shield, the company's only viable lifeline, was dead in the water without my explicit cooperation and cryptographic keys. Kestrel's multi-million-dollar investment, their golden ticket to market dominance, was absolutely contingent on a stable, ethical, and demonstrably competent leadership team, a role which I, by an extraordinary twist of fate, now unequivocally represented. My demands, presented calmly, firmly, and without apology by the formidable Sarah Chen, were declared entirely non-negotiable. Immediate reinstatement, not as lead architect, but as co-founder and chief technology officer CTO of Titan Tech, with full executive authority over all technical divisions. Indisputable co-creator status on all existing and future Sentinel Shield patents, globally with a 50% ownership stake in said patents, personally, not through Titan Tech, a significant undilutable equity stake in Titan Tech reflecting my foundational contribution to its core technology and future valuation. The exact percentage was fought over briefly, but Sarah Chen held firm. A permanent voting seat on the Titan Tech Board of Directors, a completely revised top-tier compensation package commensurate with a C-suite co-founder role, including a substantial multi-million-dollar actual success bonus for the successful creation and delivery of Sentinel Shield payable immediately. Full, unimpeded operational and strategic autonomy over the entire Sentinel Shield division, including its ongoing development, its ethical deployment guidelines, and its future product roadmap. A formal, public, and widely disseminated written apology and statement from Titan Tech, personally signed by Brandon Holt, unequivocally acknowledging my role as the chief architect and co-creator of Sentinel Shield, and explicitly correcting the previous false narrative of its origins. This statement was to be pre-approved by me. Brandon Holt and the shell-shocked Titan Tech board backed into a very public and financially perilous corner, facing the imminent and catastrophic withdrawal of Kestrel's massive investment and the subsequent implosion of their company's reputation and stock value, had absolutely no choice but to capitulate on every single point. The comprehensive agreement was drafted, reviewed by both legal teams under immense pressure, and signed before midnight, the ink barely dry as a new era for Titan Tech, and for me, unwillingly dawned. As I finally left the Titan Tech building that evening, long after most employees had gone home feeling a profound mixture of bone-deep exhaustion and an almost surreal disbelieving vindication, Rachel, Brandon's assistant, who was also working late, caught my eye from across the deserted lobby. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod and a tiny, fleeting thumbs up. It was a minuscule gesture easily missed, but in that moment it meant the world to me. A silent acknowledgement, a tiny spark of solidarity from someone on the inside who had undoubtedly witnessed Brandon's arrogance, his machinations, and his subsequent spectacular downfall firsthand. The public statement, carefully vetted by Sarah Chen and myself, went out over the wire services first thing the next morning. It was a carefully crafted masterpiece of corporate backtracking and forced humility, formally announcing my immediate appointment as Titan Tech's new Chief Technology Officer and clarifying in no uncertain terms my pivotal and singular role as the Chief Architect and co-creator of the groundbreaking Sentinel Shield AI cybersecurity system. The tech blogs, industry news sites, and even some mainstream financial press picked it up immediately, sensing a far more dramatic, juicier story lurking beneath the surface of the carefully worded, sanitized press release. My personal phone, silent for so long, began to buzz and ping relentlessly with messages from astonished former colleagues, industry contacts, recruiters who had previously ignored me, and even my old mentor, Sarah Miller, who simply texted, "Told you so, dinner next week to celebrate, you're definitely buying, and bring Chen." Emotionally, I was a strange, turbulent cocktail of heady exhilaration and profound, almost melancholic weariness. The victory was undeniably sweet, a deep, satisfying draft of long overdue justice. But the betrayal, the sheer audacity of it, had cut incredibly deep, leaving scars that I knew would take a long time to fade. That evening, after a long hot shower and a glass of wine, I steeled myself and called my parents. "Mom, Dad," I began, keeping my voice deliberately even, "I have some rather big news." There was a significant situation at work over the last couple of days quite stressful, but it's all resolved now. And as a result, I've been promoted. I'm now the Chief Technology Officer of Titan Tech. I also have a significant stake in the company, and well, Sentinel Shield is looking like it's going to be huge globally. There was a long, static-filled pause on the line. "Oh," my mother finally said, her voice sounding distant. "CTO, is that like a senior manager then? That's nice, dear. Are you still going to be working such terribly long hours? You sound very tired." My father cleared his throat on the extension. "Well, that's good, Maya. Very good. Make sure you're putting money aside contributing to your 401k. The tech industry, you know, it's so volatile. Up one day, down the next." Then Alex inevitably got on the extension, his voice tinged with an unfamiliar, almost jarring note I couldn't quite place. Was it disbelief, or a sliver of something that sounded suspiciously like envy? "Whoa, hold on, Maya. Chief Technology Officer. So, does that mean you're, rich now or something? That's awesome. Hey, listen, I've been thinking about upgrading my entire home theater sound system, was wondering if you could." I listened, a faint, almost pitying smile touching my lips. And for the very first time in my entire life, their predictable, underwhelming reactions didn't cause that familiar sharp ache of disappointment, that cold knot of inadequacy in my stomach. Instead, a quiet, profound understanding settled over me, a sense of peaceful detachment. Their world, their perceptions, their limitations. They were what they were. My validation, my sense of self-worth would no longer be sought from them, not in the desperate, needy way I'd once craved it. And that I realized with a sudden, liberating clarity was perfectly, wonderfully okay. My hard-fought victory at Titan Tech wasn't just about professional success or financial reward. It was about my deep, internal, emotional emancipation. I had finally, irrevocably set my own boundaries, defined my own intrinsic worth on my own terms, and the world, at least the part of it that truly mattered to my career and my future, had been forced to acknowledge it. The firm, resolute, almost serene feeling of this new, unshakable reality was in itself the greatest reward of all. 3 months later, the global launch of Sentinel Shield was nothing short of an unprecedented, industry-shaking success. Tech journals, normally reserved and critical, hailed it with breathless superlatives. A revolutionary leap, a genuine paradigm shift in cybersecurity. The AI Sentinel we've been waiting for. Titan Tech's valuation, which had teetered on the brink of collapse just weeks before, skyrocketed into the stratosphere, firmly planting it in the coveted unicorn territory. And at the forefront of every glowing press release, every high-profile industry presentation, every magazine cover story was Maya Lynn, co-creator, Chief Technology Officer, and the undisputed visionary mind behind the phenomenon. I wasn't just a name on an executive org chart anymore. I was the public face, the tangible human element of Sentinel Shield's disruptive innovation. My new office, significantly larger than my old windowless lab with a panoramic corner view that actually included vast swaths of the bright blue sky and the bustling city below, was a daily physical testament to the new, irrevocably altered order of things at Titan Tech. It even had a small, thriving fiddle-leaf fig tree, a gift from Rachel, who was now my incredibly efficient and fiercely loyal executive assistant. As CTO and co-founder, I moved swiftly and decisively. My first act was to completely rebuild and restructure the Sentinel Shield development team. I handpicked bright, passionate, and unequivocally ethical engineers, data scientists, and security analysts, fostering a vibrant new culture rooted in transparency, mutual respect, genuine collaboration, and zero tolerance for bullshit. I implemented crystal-clear, creator-friendly intellectual property policies, ensuring that every single contributor at every level received due credit, appropriate recognition, and robust legal protection for their innovations. My days once consumed by solitary coding and simmering resentment were now filled with leading dynamic development sprints, engaging in high-level strategic planning sessions, often with a now much more deferential, almost timid Brandon Holt, and liaising directly with the partners at Kestrel Group, who had ironically become some of my staunchest and most vocal allies in the industry. They saw me not just as a brilliant technologist, but as a symbol of integrity in a field often rife with ethically ambiguous shortcuts. Brandon Holt was still technically the CEO of Titan Tech, but his wings had been decisively publicly and permanently clipped. He remained the polished public face for certain investor relations calls and carefully stage-managed industry events. He was undeniably still good at the glad-handing and the schmoozing. But the core technical and strategic direction of the company's flagship product, its very lifeblood, was now firmly, indisputably in my hands. There was a new grudging, almost fearful respect in his eyes when he looked at me now. Or perhaps it was just a healthy, well-deserved dose of caution. He knew with absolute certainty that I was the one who held the real keys to the kingdom, the cryptographic safeguards to its continued success. And he knew from painful, first-hand experience that I wouldn't hesitate for a nanosecond to protect my work, my team, and my ethical principles. He was for all intents and purposes walking on very thin, very fragile eggshells around me, a constant, subtle reminder of his near-fatal miscalculation. Andrea Fields, interestingly, had quietly, almost invisibly resigned from Titan Tech about a month after the investor demo incident, citing a sudden, vague desire to pursue new and exciting opportunities elsewhere. The internal scuttlebutt, which spread like digital gossip, was that her position had become utterly untenable after her direct and complicit role in the attempted IP theft was so spectacularly and humiliatingly exposed, at least internally, and most damagingly to the powerful Kestrel Group. Last I heard, she was doing freelance legal consulting for much smaller, far less prestigious firms. 2 years later, the view from the enormous stage was simultaneously daunting and profoundly, breathtakingly exhilarating. Thousands of expectant faces, a veritable sea of industry peers, aspiring engineers, seasoned executives, and eager journalists looked up at me as I prepared to deliver the opening keynote address at the prestigious Global Cybersecurity Summit in Geneva. Sentinel Shield, under my continued guidance, had not only lived up to its initial groundbreaking promise, but had consistently exceeded it, evolving and adapting, becoming the undisputed gold standard, the benchmark against which all other digital defense systems were now measured. We'd accumulated a slew of prestigious industry awards, so many that they were starting to clutter my office. More importantly to me, I'd leveraged my newfound position and considerable influence to launch the Ethical AI and Creators' Rights Initiative within Titan Tech, a well-funded incubator program designed specifically to support and mentor young, diverse innovators developing technology for social good, complete with robust IP protection frameworks, ethical oversight committees, and access to top-tier mentorship. It was my way of ensuring that what happened to me wouldn't happen to others, at least not on my watch. Titan Tech was now a bona fide major player on the global tech stage, a celebrated multi-billion-dollar tech unicorn. My significant equity stake, hard-won and fiercely defended, had made me wealthy beyond what my parents, with their unwavering focus on safe, stable, predictable careers, could probably ever truly comprehend or feel comfortable with. Brandon Holt was also, of course, very wealthy. He still gave occasional, carefully vetted interviews to friendly media outlets, still took a carefully worded, generalized credit for fostering an unparalleled environment of innovation at Titan Tech. But in the influential inner circles of the tech world, in the hushed conversations at exclusive industry gatherings, the true unvarnished story of Sentinel Shield's tumultuous birth and my role in it was well known, an almost legendary cautionary tale. He was and would likely forever be the CEO, who almost fumbled the single biggest discovery his company had ever made. The guy who tried to brazenly screw over his brilliant, unsuspecting partner and got spectacularly ingeniously outmaneuvered by his own creation and her foresight. His public reputation, while largely intact on the surface, carried a permanent, subtle, indelible asterisk among those in the know. Karma hadn't bankrupted him financially, but it had certainly cost him a significant, irreplaceable measure of genuine respect, true influence, and any hope of an undisputed, untarnished legacy. He was a rich man, but a diminished one. My family dynamics had undergone their own subtle but profound, almost seismic shift. I still visited for holidays, still called on birthdays, but that desperate, aching, childlike need for their specific, often unattainable brand of approval had finally blessedly vanished, evaporated like morning mist. My success was now too public, too undeniable. Reported in mainstream publications, they actually read and respected like Forbes when I unexpectedly made a 40 under 40 list, and then, more meaningfully, a global women in tech power list. They still didn't fully understand the complex intricacies of what I did every day, the algorithms, the AI, the cybersecurity threats. But they certainly understood the visible, tangible trappings of globally recognized success, the awards, the articles, the keynote speeches, the comfortable lifestyle. My mother now proudly, if still somewhat vaguely, told her Bridge Club friends, "My daughter Maya, she's a chief technology officer at a very important, very big tech company in the city, very high up. She designs computer safety things." It wasn't the deep, insightful, soul-satisfying validation I'd once so desperately craved, but it was something. A clumsy, belated attempt at connection, perhaps even a muted form of pride, and I learned to accept it for what it was. Alex was still quintessentially Alex. He'd made a few more awkward, thinly veiled attempts to borrow significant sums of money. It's a foolproof investment opportunity. Maya practically a sure thing, guaranteed returns. Just need a little seed capital from family. I'd politely but firmly declined each time, instead offering to connect him with a reputable, independent financial advisor, an offer he never took up. He hadn't faced any dramatic personal or professional downfall. He was still muddling along in middle management at the bank, living a perfectly average life. But his ordinary, incremental successes, once the focus of all family praise, seemed to pale even in his own eyes now, especially when juxtaposed against what he clearly perceived as my meteoric, almost incomprehensible rise. There was a new, slightly odd, distinctly resentful, and occasionally sycophantic tone in his voice when he spoke to me now, a shift that I found more pitiable than satisfying. The most significant, most meaningful, and most healing change, however, was unequivocally within me. I'd painstakingly built a strong, supportive, authentic network of genuine friends, trusted colleagues, and respected mentors who truly saw me unconditionally, valued me for my mind and my character, and consistently challenged me in the best, most growth-inducing ways. My old mentor, Sarah Miller, the one who'd first told me to claim my successes, was now a valued, highly paid member of Titan Tech's External Ethical Advisory Board, a position I'd personally and gleefully recommended her for. I was even tentatively, carefully exploring a genuine personal relationship with someone, a brilliant astrophysicist I'd met at a cross-disciplinary conference, who admired my mind as much as my success, and who wasn't remotely intimidated by either, which was in itself a revelation. Reflecting on the entire tumultuous, often terrifying journey, the lessons learned were etched into my very being, as indelible as source code. Document everything meticulously. Know your intrinsic worth and never ever let anyone else define it for you. And crucially, don't be afraid to proactively, even preemptively, embed your own integrity protocols into your life and your career, whatever form they may take. Sometimes the greatest, most impenetrable shields are the ones you build, not just with elegant lines of code, but with unwavering foresight, unshakable courage, and an unyielding, deeply rooted belief in your own contributions and your right to claim them. The quiet, overlooked girl who loved the intricate beauty of complex systems had finally learned to navigate and ultimately master the most complex, unpredictable, and often treacherous system of all human ambition, corporate power, and the deeply personal, universal fight for recognition and justice. And she hadn't just survived the game, she had fundamentally, irrevocably rewritten its rules. My peace, I realized looking out at the thousands of expectant faces in Geneva, was hard-won, fiercely defended, but it was at last profoundly, unshakably, authentically mine. So after all that sound and fury, what's the real lasting takeaway from this whirlwind journey from overlooked coder to co-founding CTO? It's profoundly more than just a dramatic story about audacious corporate intrigue, intellectual property battles, and a strategically, satisfyingly well-placed digital tripwire. The deepest, most resonant moral of this story, the one I hope stays with you, is about the critical importance of recognizing fiercely, protecting, and unapologetically proclaiming your intrinsic value. Especially, and most urgently, when the world around you or even those supposedly closest to you might consciously or unconsciously try to diminish it, discount it, or outright steal it. It's about understanding in your very core that your unique contributions truly matter, that your authentic voice unequivocally deserves to be heard and respected, and that your intellectual and creative creations are sacrosanct extensions of yourself that warrant fierce, unwavering protection. Remember, meticulous preparedness isn't paranoia. More often than not, it's profound wisdom born from hard-won experience and an understanding of human nature. Have you ever been in a high-stakes situation where you felt your critical work was about to be stolen or your hard-earned credit unfairly, brazenly denied? What concrete steps did you take, or in hindsight, what do you wish you had the foresight or courage to have done differently? Have you ever felt that those old, ingrained family patterns of being overlooked or undervalued were insidiously replaying themselves in your professional life like a stuck record? Please drop a comment below. I genuinely love to hear your personal stories and insights. Let's create a space here to learn from and support each other's journeys. If this story, my story, resonated with you on any level, if you've ever had to summon every ounce of your courage to fight for what's rightfully, undeniably yours, or if you simply believe in the deeply satisfying power of the underestimated underdog, finally, spectacularly getting their due, please hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories of resilience, justice, and ultimate triumph, and share this with anyone in your network who might need to hear this message of empowerment today. Especially share this if you believe, as I now do with every fiber of my being, in the absolute necessity of standing up for your worth and ensuring your unique voice is never ever silenced or appropriated.